Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. If you enjoy emotional stories about family, difficult choices, unexpected betrayals, and justice that arrives when nobody expects it, subscribe to the channel. Now, let me tell you about the day I realized that losing a family can hurt more than losing the people themselves. My name is Patricia Mercer. I'm 75 years old. For most of my life, I believed that kindness always came back to you. I believed that if you loved your children enough, one day they would remember every sacrifice you made for them. Maybe that's true for most families. It wasn't true for mine. The day my family abandoned me at the airport, I still believed they loved me. The hardest part wasn't watching the plane leave. The hardest part was realizing they had planned every second of it. It started almost a month earlier. My son, Russell, called me on a quiet Tuesday evening. His voice sounded happier than it had in years. "Mom, we finally decided to take that family vacation we've been talking about forever. Just us. You, Naomi, Miles, and me." I laughed. I honestly thought he was joking. Russell rarely took time off work. Naomi always seemed too busy. Miles was in college. Getting everyone together felt almost impossible. "That's exactly why we're doing it," Russell said. "Life moves too fast. We need to spend time together while we still can." Those words stayed with me. While we still can. Looking back, I wonder if he felt guilty even then, or if he had already convinced himself that what he was about to do was necessary. Over the following weeks, Russell handled everything: the flights, the hotel, transportation, restaurant reservations, every detail. Whenever I asked how much I owed him, he smiled. "Don't worry about it, Mom. This one's my treat." I felt proud. My son had become successful, generous, responsible, or at least, that's what I believed. The night before our trip, Miles stopped by my house. He looked nervous, not anxious, guilty. He barely touched his dinner. He kept checking his phone. Every few minutes, I asked him if something was wrong. He smiled too quickly. "Everything's fine, Grandma. Just a lot going on." I didn't push. Young people carry their own worries. Sometimes they need silence more than advice. When he left, he hugged me tighter than usual. For just a moment, I thought he might be crying. The next morning, Russell picked me up at 6. Naomi was already in the passenger seat. Miles sat quietly in the back. Nobody seemed excited. I tried making conversation. I talked about the beach, about the weather, about the little seafood restaurant your grandfather and I used to visit. No one really answered. I assumed everyone was simply tired. The airport was already busy. Families rushed through the entrance. Business travelers dragged expensive suitcases behind them. Children laughed. People argued over coffee. It felt like every life around me was moving somewhere important. Russell took my suitcase before I could reach for it. "I've got it, Mom. You just relax." Naomi carried a folder containing all of our travel documents. At one point, I held out my hand. "Shouldn't I keep my boarding pass?" She smiled. "I've organized everything. It's easier this way." That sounded reasonable. Families help each other. Families trust each other. At least, healthy families do. We reached the security checkpoint. The line stretched almost to the entrance. Russell glanced toward the departure screens, then at his watch. His expression suddenly changed. "We're cutting this too close." Naomi nodded immediately. She looked almost rehearsed. Russell turned toward me. "Mom, stay right here. We'll get through security first. Then I'll come back and walk you through." I frowned. "Can passengers even come back through security?" He answered without hesitation. "Airport staff do it all the time. Don't worry. We'll only be 5 minutes." He smiled. It was the same smile I'd seen when he was 6 years old. The same smile he wore after breaking a window with a baseball. The same smile after graduating high school. The same smile after telling me he was getting married. I trusted that smile, without another thought. I watched the three of them disappear into the crowd. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I checked my phone. No messages. 15 minutes. I called Russell. Voicemail. I called Naomi. Her phone was turned off. Miles. No answer. I told myself not to panic. Security lines can be unpredictable. People lose signal. Batteries die. There had to be a simple explanation. 25 minutes later, the waiting area around me had almost emptied. Most passengers had already gone through. I was still standing exactly where my son had left me. Then someone gently touched my shoulder. "Excuse me, ma'am. Are you Patricia Mercer?" I turned around. A young airline employee stood behind me holding a tablet. "Yes." She smiled politely. "I've been looking for you. Your flight is boarding now." Relief flooded through me. Wonderful. My family must already be waiting at the gate. Her smile slowly disappeared. "Mrs. Mercer, according to our system, they've already boarded." I smiled politely. "That can't be right. My son told me he'd come back for me." The airline employee looked at her screen again. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Mercer. The 3 passengers traveling with you cleared security almost 30 minutes ago. They haven't returned." My heart began to beat a little faster. Maybe they couldn't get back through the checkpoint. Maybe they were waiting at the gate. "Can you call them?" "Of course." She dialed Russell first. The call went straight to voicemail. She tried Naomi. The phone was turned off. Then Miles. No answer. She frowned. "Would you like me to make an announcement?" I nodded. "Please." A minute later, her voice echoed through the terminal. "Mr. Russell Mercer, Mrs. Russell, Mrs. Barry. Patricia Mercer is waiting for you near the security checkpoint. Please return immediately." "Thank you." We waited. People continued walking past us. Some looked tired. Some looked excited. Nobody came. 5 more minutes passed. The employee checked her watch. "Boarding is almost complete. Let's get you to the gate. Maybe they've already explained everything there." I followed her as quickly as I could. The closer we came to gate B17, the emptier the hallway became. When we finally arrived, the gate agent looked at us with sympathy. "I'm sorry, the doors are already closed." I stared through the large window. The aircraft was still connected to the pushback vehicle. We were only seconds too late. "Can I still board?" The gate agent typed something into her computer. Then her expression changed. "Mrs. Mercer, may I see your passport?" I handed it over. She compared it with the information on her screen, then looked back at me. Something isn't right. She called another employee. They whispered together for almost a minute. Finally, she turned back toward me. "Your boarding pass couldn't have been accepted." "Why not?" "Because your reservation isn't valid." I frowned. "What does that mean?" She rotated the monitor slightly so I could see it. "This reservation was modified 4 days ago. Your date of birth was changed. Your passport says 1950. The reservation says 1965. I felt the blood drain from my face. Someone entered it incorrectly. The gate agent slowly shook her head. "No. Our system records every modification. This wasn't entered incorrectly. Someone logged into the reservation, opened your passenger information, and changed only your birth year. Nothing else." I stared at the screen. Only one person had access to those tickets. Russell. The employee spoke gently. "Did someone else book this trip for you?" "Yes, my son." She hesitated before asking her next question. "Did he know your correct birthday?" I almost laughed. He celebrated it every year for nearly 5 decades. Of course he knew. Silence filled the room. Nobody needed to say what both of us were thinking. The mistake wasn't a mistake. The loudspeaker interrupted us. "Flight 482 to Boston has departed. Thank you for choosing Northern Air." I turned toward the window. The aircraft slowly pushed away from the gate. Its engines began to roar. I watched it move farther and farther away. Russell was on that plane. Naomi was beside him. Miles was somewhere behind them, and not one of them had looked back. The gate agent quietly placed a hand on my shoulder. "I'm so sorry. Would you like us to book you on the next flight?" I wiped my eyes. "No, I don't even know where my family is going anymore." She looked confused. "Isn't it Boston?" I opened my mouth, then stopped. Russell had planned everything. Hotels, transportation, the schedule. I didn't even know the name of the hotel or where in Boston we were supposed to stay. For the first time, I realized how completely I had trusted him. The gate agent asked one more question. "Mrs. Mercer, do you have someone who can come pick you up?" I thought about calling a friend, then remembered almost everyone my age had either moved away or passed away. "I'll take a taxi. Thank you." She nodded. As I turned to leave, she called after me. "Mrs. Mercer, there's something else." I looked back. According to the reservation history, the changes to your ticket weren't made this week. They were scheduled almost 3 months ago. 3 months. I stood completely still. Russell hadn't decided to leave me behind that morning. He hadn't even decided the week before. He had planned it, long before he ever invited me on the trip. And suddenly, every kind word, every smile, every promise felt like part of a script he had been rehearsing for months. The taxi ride home felt longer than usual, not because of traffic, because my mind refused to stop asking the same question. Why? Why would my own son spend 3 months planning to leave me behind? Every answer I came up with sounded impossible. Russell wasn't cruel. At least, that was the version of him I had carried in my heart for 48 years. When the taxi stopped in front of my house, something immediately felt wrong. Russell's SUV was gone. That wasn't unusual. But Naomi's car was gone too. The curtains in the front windows were open. They were always closed. I paid the driver and walked toward the porch. There were fresh tire tracks in the driveway, several of them, heavy ones, as if a moving truck had been parked there. My stomach tightened. I unlocked the front door. The house was quiet, too quiet. Not the peaceful silence of an empty home. The strange silence that follows people leaving in a hurry. I stepped inside. The hallway looked exactly the same. Family photographs still covered the walls. My husband's old coat still hung beside the door. Everything seemed normal until I looked into the living room. Russell's favorite leather chair was gone. The bookshelf Naomi had bought 5 years earlier was gone. The television, the rug, the floor lamp. Even the small coffee table Miles had scratched with his toy cars when he was 4, gone. Only pale rectangles remained on the hardwood floor where the furniture had stood. I slowly walked farther into the room. The dining area was almost empty. Half the chairs had disappeared. Several boxes were stacked against one wall. Most of them were open. Some still contained packing paper. I whispered to myself, "What happened here?" Then I heard footsteps outside. Someone knocked gently. "Mrs. Mercer?" It was my neighbor, Harold Bennett, 79 years old, retired mail carrier. He had lived across the street for almost 30 years. I opened the door. Harold looked surprised. "Patricia, you're back already?" "Back? From your trip?" I forced a smile. "There wasn't much of a trip." His forehead wrinkled. "That's strange. I watched the moving truck leave this morning." "Moving truck?" He nodded. "I assumed your family had already left for the airport. 2 men spent nearly 3 hours loading furniture. Russell said you wanted fewer things around the house." I stared at him. "Russell told you that?" Harold nodded. "He said traveling had become difficult for you, that you wanted to simplify your life." My chest tightened. Russell had spoken for me. Again. Harold looked around the half-empty living room. "Everything all right?" I wanted to tell him the truth. Instead, I heard myself say, "I'm not sure anymore." He stepped inside, slowly looking around. His expression changed. "Patricia, something doesn't feel right. Neither does any of this." He walked toward the dining room, then suddenly stopped. "Didn't there used to be a piano here?" I nodded. "Charles bought it for our 25th anniversary. Where is it?" I looked around. For the first time, I realized it was gone too. My husband had spent years restoring that piano himself. Russell knew exactly what it meant to me. He had learned his first Christmas song sitting beside his father. He knew. Harold looked at me carefully. "Did you agree to any of this?" "No." The answer escaped my mouth before I could think. "No, I didn't." Harold became very quiet. Then he asked something that hadn't crossed my mind. "Patricia, where's your suitcase?" I looked toward the front hallway. Russell had carried it at the airport. He never gave it back. Every piece of clothing I packed, every prescription, my passport, my medication, everything was inside, and it was flying somewhere over the Atlantic with my son. Before I could process that thought, my cell phone vibrated. Russell. For one brief second, I almost smiled. Finally, I answered immediately. Russell, where are you? There was a long silence, then his calm voice. Mom, you made it home. It wasn't a question. He already knew. Mom, you made it home. His voice was calm, too calm, as if he were calling to ask whether I'd remembered to water the flowers. Russell, why? Another pause. I knew that silence. He always used it before saying something he hoped would sound reasonable. I'm sorry things happen this way. Things? I repeated. You left me at the airport, you changed my ticket, you took my suitcase, you emptied my house, and you're calling those things? He sighed. Mom, please don't make this harder than it already is. I almost laughed. Harder? For who? For me or for you? He didn't answer. Instead, he asked a question. Did Harold come over? I looked toward my neighbor. He was standing only a few feet away, watching me with concern. How do you know Harold was here? Another silence. Then Russell spoke carefully. Because I know him. If he saw the truck, he would check on you. That answer sounded reasonable, yet something about it bothered me. Russell wasn't surprised, not even a little. It was as though he had rehearsed this conversation. Mom, I need you to trust me. Those words hurt more than anything else. Trust you? I trusted you this morning. I stood exactly where you told me to stand. I waited. I defended you in my own mind. I kept believing there had to be an explanation. Russell lowered his voice. There is. Then explain it. Not yet. My heart sank. Not yet? When? When you calm down. I closed my eyes. No, you're the one who needs to explain yourself. Right now. He took a slow breath. The agency couldn't see you. I frowned. What agency? He didn't answer immediately. Then, the adoption agency. The room became completely silent. Even Harold looked confused. Adoption? Russell continued. Naomi and I have been trying to adopt for almost 4 years. We finally reached the last stage. The final interview. Everything depended on this trip. I struggled to understand. Russell, what does that have to do with me? His answer came quietly. Everything. I felt as though I had misheard him. Everything? Yes. The social worker wanted to interview us at the apartment. She wanted to observe our daily life, our relationships, our home environment. I still didn't understand. That's wonderful. Why would that require leaving me behind? Russell hesitated. Because you weren't supposed to be there. My fingers tightened around the phone. I live here, not according to the paperwork. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe. What paperwork? Russell spoke carefully. The agency believes you've been living comfortably in a senior community for over 2 years. Harold's eyes widened. I slowly sat down. You told them I don't live in my own house? It was the easiest solution. My voice became almost a whisper. Solution? Mom, please listen. No, you listen. You lied about me, he answered immediately. Only because they ask complicated questions. Families lose opportunities over tiny details. We couldn't take that risk. I looked around my own living room, half empty, stripped of memories. So you abandoned me. Because I would tell the truth? He didn't answer. That silence was answer enough. Then he spoke again. If the interviewer had seen you, everything would have fallen apart. I asked the only question that mattered. So your plan was to put me on a plane that I could never board? Russell finally stopped pretending. Yes, it was only supposed to be for 2 days. You would have stayed at the airport hotel, then we'd have come back. Nobody would have gotten hurt. I stared ahead, unable to believe what I was hearing. Nobody would have gotten hurt? Russell, I thought something terrible had happened to you. I thought maybe your plane had crashed. Maybe you'd been kidnapped. Maybe you were lying unconscious in a hospital somewhere. And all that time, you already knew exactly where I was." He said nothing, not a single word. Finally, I asked, "Did Naomi know?" "Yes." "Did Miles know?" Another pause. Then, "Not everything." I looked toward Harold. His face had become pale. Russell spoke one last time. "Mom, please don't contact the agency. You'll destroy everything we've worked for." I slowly lowered the phone from my ear. For the first time since Charles died, I realized I no longer recognized the voice of my own son. Then, without another word, I ended the call. The phone rang again almost immediately. I didn't answer. A second time, then a third. Finally, a message appeared on the screen. "Please don't make this worse." Before I could even process those words, someone knocked on the front door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Harold looked through the window, then turned toward me. "Patricia, there's a woman outside. She's holding a badge and a folder. She says she's from the adoption agency." Harold opened the front door. A woman in her early 40s stood on the porch. She wore a navy blazer. A leather folder rested under one arm. Her expression was professional, but not cold. "Good afternoon. My name is Claire Donovan. I'm looking for Patricia Mercer." I slowly stood. "I'm Patricia." She smiled politely. "Mrs. Mercer, I'm very sorry to arrive without notice. May I come in?" Something in her voice told me this wasn't routine. I stepped aside. "Please." Claire entered the house. The moment she looked around the living room, she stopped. Her eyes moved across the empty spaces, the missing furniture, the open boxes. Then she quietly closed her folder. "This isn't what I expected, neither did I." She glanced at Harold. "Family, neighbor, friend?" He answered before I could. Claire nodded. "Would you mind giving us a little privacy?" Harold looked at me. "Are you all right?" For the first time that day, I honestly didn't know. "I think so." He squeezed my shoulder gently. "I'll be right across the street. If you need anything, anything at all, call me." After the door closed, silence filled the room. Claire didn't immediately begin asking questions. Instead, she looked at me. Really looked at me. "Mrs. Mercer, can I ask you something unusual? Go ahead. Have you been living in this house continuously?" I blinked. "Of course, for 36 years. She slowly nodded. "And have you ever lived in assisted housing?" "Never." "Not even temporarily?" "No." Claire opened her folder. Inside were several documents, some photographs, a printed floor plan, and what looked like interview notes. "Mrs. Mercer, I'm afraid someone has provided our agency with very different information." She turned one page toward me. There, in black ink, was my name, Patricia Mercer. Current residence, Maple Grove Senior Living Community. Resident since 2 years earlier. I stared at the page. "I've never even heard of Maple Grove." Claire quietly made another note. "Just as I thought." I looked up. "What does any of this mean?" She folded her hands. "Your son and daughter-in-law have been in the final stage of adopting a little girl. She's 6 years old. Her name is Lily." For a brief moment, everything inside me became strangely quiet. A child. There was a child at the center of all this. Claire continued. "Our agency performs extensive background evaluations. We verify financial stability, relationships, living conditions, extended family, support systems." I nodded slowly. "That sounds reasonable. One of our requirements is honesty. If applicants intentionally provide false information, the process stops immediately. No exceptions." I swallowed. "Russell lied because of me." Claire gently corrected me. "No, Russell lied about you. There's an important difference." Those words struck me harder than I expected. For hours, I had been wondering what I had done wrong. Claire had answered that question in a single sentence. "Nothing," she continued. "According to your son's application, you voluntarily moved into assisted living because you preferred an independent senior community. He also stated that you visited often, but no longer wished to live with family." I looked around my own home. I never moved anywhere. I know, she said quietly. Then why are you here? Claire took a deep breath. Because something didn't make sense. I frowned. What do you mean? Yesterday I spoke with your grandson, Miles. My heart skipped. Miles? Yes, it wasn't planned. He answered the front door while I was conducting a final home observation. He seemed nervous. I remembered the way he'd looked at dinner, the hug before leaving, the sadness in his eyes. Claire continued. I asked him a simple question. When was the last time you visited your grandmother? He answered, yesterday. According to the application, you lived almost 400 miles away. Claire looked directly into my eyes. Miles froze. Just for a second. But I've been doing this job for 16 years. Sometimes 1 second tells you everything. So instead of closing the file, I started asking more questions. Russell became unusually defensive. Naomi kept answering questions that weren't directed at her. And Miles stopped speaking altogether. Claire paused. That's when I decided to drive here myself, without telling anyone, to verify one final detail. She looked around the room once more. Instead, I found you standing in a half-empty house, after your own family left you behind. Before I could answer, Claire quietly reached into her folder. She removed a photograph, then slid it across the coffee table toward me. Mrs. Mercer, there's something I think you should see. I looked down. The photograph showed Russell, Naomi, and a little blonde girl holding hands. All three of them were smiling. Across the bottom, someone had written in blue marker, "Our forever family." But there was one detail, one tiny detail, that made my heart stop. I picked up the photograph. At first, I only saw what Claire wanted me to see. Russell, Naomi, the little girl. She couldn't have been older than 6. She had bright blue eyes, a shy smile, and she was holding a stuffed rabbit almost as big as her arm. She looked happy, safe, hopeful. Then my eyes drifted to the background. The picture had been taken inside my living room. I recognized the fireplace, the bookshelves, even the old grandfather clock Charles had rebuilt by hand. But something was missing. Me. I looked back at Claire. This was taken here. She nodded. About 2 weeks ago. I searched my memory. 2 weeks earlier, Russell had called me. Mom, would you mind spending the afternoon with Harold? We're having the carpets cleaned. I smiled sadly. There were never any carpet cleaners. No, Claire said quietly. There weren't. They brought Lily here for a supervised family visit. Without telling you. I stared at the photograph again. Every object in the room looked familiar. Every smile looked genuine. The only person erased from the family was the woman who actually lived there. Why? I whispered. Claire answered carefully. Because they wanted the agency to believe this house belonged only to them, that there were no unresolved family responsibilities, no dependent relatives, no potential conflicts. I looked down. Dependent. I had raised Russell, paid for college, helped with the down payment on his first home, watched Miles every weekend while they worked. Somehow, I had become a conflict. Claire reached into the folder once more. There's something else. She handed me another document. This one wasn't from the agency. It was a signed statement. Russell Mercer. I began reading. My mother has lived independently in a senior residence by her own choice for over 2 years. She has an active social life and prefers not to participate in family activities involving young children. I stopped reading. I couldn't continue. I had never said those words. I had never felt those things. Claire spoke gently. There are 3 separate statements like that, each signed by your son, one signed by Naomi, and all submitted under penalty of perjury. Harold had quietly returned with a casserole from his house. He had left it just inside the door before hearing our conversation. Now he stepped into the room. Patricia, may I say something? I nodded. He looked at Claire. I've lived across the street for 29 years. This woman hasn't spent one night anywhere except this house since her husband died. If somebody claims otherwise, they're lying. Claire gave him a grateful smile. "Thank you. Your statement may become important." I looked between them. "Important?" Claire closed the folder. "Mrs. Mercer, once deception reaches this level, it no longer concerns only adoption. It becomes fraud." My stomach tightened. Fraud, that word sounded heavier than betrayal, much heavier. Just then my phone vibrated again. Russell, this time a text message. "Mom, please answer. You don't understand what's happening." Claire noticed my expression. "Is that your son?" "Yes." "Would you mind if I listened?" I shook my head. "No. I think it's time someone else heard the truth, too." I pressed the call button. Russell answered immediately. "Mom, thank God. Listen to me. Whatever anyone tells you, please don't believe them." I placed the phone on speaker. "I'm listening." His voice softened. "You know I love you." Claire quietly wrote something in her notebook. Russell continued. "Everything I did for our family. I finally asked the question that had been burning inside me all day. Then why didn't you simply ask me for help?" Silence. A long silence. "Finally," he answered, "because I knew you'd say no." I frowned. "No, I wouldn't. If you had told me the truth, I would have helped however I could." He laughed once. A short, bitter laugh. "No, Mom. You would have insisted on meeting Lily. You would have wanted to be involved. You would have asked questions. You always ask questions, and we couldn't risk that." Claire looked up immediately. "Risk what?" Russell froze. For the first time, he realized another person was listening. Who was that? Claire leaned closer to the phone. "My name is Claire Donovan. I'm the senior caseworker assigned to your adoption file." The silence that followed lasted nearly 10 seconds. Then Russell spoke, very quietly. "Claire, I can explain everything." Her answer was calm. "Good, because tomorrow morning you're going to have that opportunity, in person, at our office." She ended the call before he could say another word. Then she looked at me. "Mrs. Mercer, I don't think today was the beginning of this story. I think today was the day it finally started falling apart." I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the airplane pulling away from the gate. Then I saw the little girl in the photograph, Lily. She had no idea who I was. She had no idea that the smiling family standing beside her had spent months building their future on a lie. By 7 the next morning, Claire was waiting outside my house. She wasn't wearing the navy blazer anymore. Instead, she carried a simple leather briefcase. Today wasn't another home visit. Today was official. "Are you ready?" she asked gently. I looked at my front door before locking it. "No, but I'm coming anyway." The drive to the agency took almost 40 minutes. Neither of us spoke very much. Claire seemed to understand that my silence wasn't empty. It was full. Full of questions, full of memories, full of disappointment. When we arrived, the building looked surprisingly ordinary. No giant government offices, no intimidating security, just a quiet brick building with children's drawings displayed in the front lobby, families, smiling faces, tiny handprints framed on colorful paper. Every picture reminded me why honesty mattered, not for paperwork, for children. Claire led me into a conference room. A long wooden table filled most of the space. Pitchers of water, legal folders, a recorder sat in the middle. Within minutes, the door opened. Russell walked in first. His suit was perfectly pressed. His tie matched his jacket. If someone had seen him for the first time, they would have described him as successful, responsible, trustworthy. Naomi entered behind him. She looked exhausted. Her eyes were swollen. She had clearly spent the night crying. Miles followed last. He avoided everyone's eyes, especially mine. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. Then Russell looked directly at me. "Mom, I'm glad you came." Those 6 words made something inside me break. Glad? He had abandoned me, lied about me, erased me from his life. And now he was acting as though we were attending a family dinner. Claire entered the room and closed the door. Good morning. This meeting is being recorded. Its purpose is to clarify several discrepancies discovered during the adoption assessment. She looked at Russell. Do you understand? Yes. Do you agree to proceed? Yes. She pressed one button on the recorder. The small red light turned on. Let's begin. Claire opened the first folder. Mr. Mercer, did you state in your application that Patricia Mercer had voluntarily lived at Maple Grove Senior Living for the past 2 years? Russell didn't hesitate. Yes. Claire turned another page. Was that statement true? Russell inhaled slowly. Not exactly. The room became silent. Claire didn't react. Not exactly. Means what? He rubbed his hands together. She stayed with us most of the time. Sometimes she stayed here, sometimes she stayed elsewhere. Claire calmly slid a utility bill across the table. Electricity, water, property taxes. Every document listed only one permanent resident, Patricia Mercer, every month. For 6 consecutive years, she looked at him. Would you like to revise your answer? Russell finally nodded. Yes, she lived there. The entire time. Claire wrote one sentence, then continued. Why did you submit false information? Russell looked toward me. Because I thought it would give Lily a better future. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. By pretending I didn't exist? He finally looked at me. You don't understand how difficult adoption is. One mistake, one complication, and everything disappears. I answered quietly. So you decided I should disappear instead? Russell lowered his eyes. He didn't deny it. Claire asked another question. Did Patricia Mercer know she had been listed as living somewhere else? No. Did she consent? No. Did she sign any documents? No. Each answer seemed heavier than the last. Then Claire reached for another folder. This one was thicker, much thicker. Mr. Mercer, would you explain why your mother was intentionally prevented from boarding yesterday's flight? Russell looked genuinely surprised. I never stopped her from boarding. Claire placed the airline report on the table. Your online account modified only one reservation, your mother's. 3 months before departure. Would you like to explain why? Russell looked at Naomi, then back at Claire. I thought she would simply be delayed. Delayed? Claire repeated. For how long? A day, maybe 2. Claire leaned forward slightly. Mr. Mercer, your mother is 75 years old. She was left alone in a crowded international airport, without medication, without clothing, without identification, without any hotel reservation, without any family member answering the phone. She paused, then asked the question that froze the room. Exactly what outcome were you expecting? No one answered. Not immediately. Russell looked down at the table. His hands, which had seemed so steady only moments before, were now trembling. Claire repeated the question. Mr. Mercer, what exactly did you expect would happen to your mother? He finally spoke. I thought airport staff would help her. I thought she'd stay in a hotel. Then we'd come back. It wasn't supposed to become this. Claire's expression didn't change. So you intentionally created a situation where a 75-year-old woman would be stranded alone, and you believed someone else would take responsibility for her safety. Russell lowered his head. Yes. The silence that followed felt endless. Then Naomi spoke for the first time. It was my idea. Everyone turned toward her. Russell looked shocked. Naomi, stop. She ignored him. I was afraid. Afraid that we'd lose Lily. Every family we'd met during the process seemed perfect. Perfect homes, perfect finances, perfect backgrounds. I kept thinking, if they saw one complication, they'd choose someone else. Claire asked quietly. So Patricia became that complication? Naomi closed her eyes. Yes. Tears rolled down her face. I'm ashamed to admit it, but yes. Claire made another note. Fear explains decisions. It does not excuse them. Then she looked toward the end of the table. Miles, you've been very quiet today. Would you like to add anything? For several seconds, he didn't move. Then he slowly reached into his backpack. He removed his phone. "I have something." Russell immediately became tense. "Miles, don't!" His grandson looked directly at him. "I'm done lying." He unlocked the phone, then handed it to Claire. "These are our family messages. Please read the ones from last week." Claire silently scrolled through the conversation. Her expression slowly changed. She stopped on one message, then another. Finally, she placed the phone on the table. "Mr. Mercer, did you write this message?" Russell didn't answer. Claire read it aloud. "We just need her out of the way for 48 hours. After the interview, everything will be finished." The room fell completely silent. She continued reading. "Don't answer her calls. If she panics, she'll go back home instead of trying to reach us." Then, one final message. "If anyone asks, tell them she chose not to travel." Claire gently locked the phone. "Thank you, Miles. That answers several important questions." Russell buried his face in his hands. Naomi began crying quietly. I looked at my grandson. His eyes were full of regret. "I'm sorry, Grandma. I should have told you." Before the trip, I was scared. I stood up, walked around the table, and hugged him, not because everything was forgiven, but because he had finally chosen the truth. Claire waited until the room settled. Then she spoke. "Based on the evidence presented today, this agency is closing your adoption file effective immediately. Any future application will require a full review by the Ethics Committee." She paused, then added something unexpected. "This decision is not punishment. It is protection. Children deserve homes built on trust, not deception." Russell slowly stood. "So that's it? 4 years gone?" Claire met his eyes. "No, Mr. Mercer, the adoption process didn't end today. It ended the day you decided honesty was optional." Russell looked toward me. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Mom, I'm sorry." I searched his face. "For the little boy I once knew, for the son who used to run into my arms after school, for the young father who cried when Miles was born. I could still see pieces of him, but they were buried beneath years of selfish choices." I answered calmly. "I believe you're sorry. I just don't think you're sorry for what you did. I think you're sorry it failed." He couldn't argue, because he knew I was right. 2 months later, life had become strangely peaceful. Harold still brought me coffee every Sunday morning. Claire visited once to check on me, not as an investigator, as a friend. Miles came every weekend. Sometimes we talked for hours. Sometimes we simply sat on the porch in silence. That was enough. As for Russell, I heard he and Naomi had separated. The pressure of everything that happened had been too much. I didn't celebrate it. Pain rarely creates happiness. It only creates more pain. One afternoon, Miles helped me move the old piano back into the living room. It had been recovered before it could be sold. He sat beside me on the bench. "Grandma, do you think our family can ever heal?" I rested my hand over his. "Families don't heal because people share the same name. They heal because someone finally chooses the truth." He nodded quietly. Then he smiled. A real smile this time, the kind I hadn't seen in a very long time. Looking back now, people sometimes ask me whether I regret trusting my son. I don't. Trust wasn't my mistake. His betrayal was. And if there's one thing life has taught me, it's this. Never measure your worth by how someone else chooses to treat you, because character is revealed not by the people who are abandoned, but by the people willing to do the abandoning.